بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. I am Dr. Motasim Billah, and today we will discuss the pharyngeal apparatus. What is pharyngeal apparatus? Pharyngeal apparatus is an embryonic structures comprises of pharyngeal arches, pharyngeal clefts, and pharyngeal pouches. These three things constitutes the pharyngeal apparatus. What are the pharyngeal arches? We will start from this. The pharyngeal arches has got the major contribution in the development of head and neck region. These pharyngeal arches are also called bronchial arches because it was very similar in the development of the gills of the fish. But later on, when the research was done, more and more research was done, it was a bit different from the gills of the fishes because they were communicating and they are not communicating with each other, with the interior exterior, and they are called pharyngeal arches, not bronchial arches anymore. These pharyngeal arches appear in the 4th and 5th week of development of the embryo. 4th and 5th week means just 1 month, at the age of 1 month, or at the end of the 1st month. If you concentrate on this diagram, this is a diagram of the embryo. This is a longitudinal section. The upper one is the cranial region and the lower one is the caudal region. And if you remember the development of the new tube formation, so we told and that we knew from there that when the tube is found, it is open above and below. It is open tube, and by a pore or by an opening which is called neuropore. The upper one is called cranial neuropore, and the lower one or the caudal one is called caudal neuropore. In the cephalic region or in the cranial region, you can see 2 bulges, and which it has written 1st and 2nd pharyngeal arch. And this is at the age of about 25 days, means 4th week. And if you see at the 5th week, you can appreciate these pharyngeal arches along with a narrow groove toward the surface, which is called pharyngeal clefts. So we will discuss it today. It is from one side, it is bilateral. On both sides, these pharyngeal arches and pouches are there from the midline, and we see it in the lateral position on the one side. For better understanding, if you concentrate on this diagram, these pharyngeal arches are the mesenchymal tissues. Actually, they are made of mesoderm. These are the bars of the mesoderm, but these mesoderm has been changed into mesenchymal tissue. Mesenchymal tissue are the loose connective tissue which are capable of the formation of each and every tissue in the body. This is the definition of the mesenchyme. So actually this mesodermal tissues in the form of a bar, they are separated from each other. You can appreciate in this diagram. And from the outside, it is going inside. You can see the blue color, and here written pharyngeal cleft. This is from the outside, which is a line seen, and it has gone toward the inner side. This is the ectoderm. And on the other side, you can see the black and the pink area, and here the lining is seen, and this lining is going toward the cleft side. And in this way, because of these 2 furrows towards each other, they differentiate this mesenchyme into different bars. So we can say that the pharyngeal arches are the bars of the mesodermal tissue. They are lined from outside by the ectoderm in the form of the pharyngeal clefts and lined by the endodermal layer by pharyngeal pouches. So this is called the pharyngeal apparatus. I hope you might have understand now. These are the mesenchymal tissues. Actually, they are mesodermal, but they have been converted to mesenchymal tissues. They are lined from outside by an ectodermal layer, which is called pharyngeal layer or pharyngeal cleft because they go in. So these are in the form of cleft, and they are called pharyngeal clefts. And from the inner side, from the mouth side, mouth cavity side, it is lined by the endodermal layer, and which goes toward the cleft. And these furrows or depressions are called the pharyngeal pouches. So the combination of pharyngeal arches along with the pharyngeal cleft and pharyngeal pouches, they will contribute to the pharyngeal apparatus. These pharyngeal arches are usually 5, but they are numbered as 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. Usually the 5th one becomes degenerated and it has got no derivative in the life. Here you can see the structure of the face and skull. So you remember from the other lecture in the development of the face, I told you in that time that the first 2 arches, they have got a major contribution in the development of the face and skull. You remember that 3-4 things are taking part in the development of the face. Number 1, pharyngeal mesoderm. You know the pharyngeal mesoderm. The lateral plate mesoderm, these are the parts of the mesodermal layer, embryonic mesoderm, which we have divided in the pharyngeal, then the intermediate, and then the lateral plate mesoderm. So here the pharyngeal and the lateral plate mesoderm taking part in the formation of the face. The third thing is the neural crest cells. You know that when the neural tube is formed, on the crest level, there are cells which change their characters and they try to disconnect from that area. So that when the tube is forming and the edges are combining with each other, they slip from this area and they migrate in different direction, that is ventral and dorsal. So the neural crest has a main role. And the other thing is the neuroectoderm, which forming the lens placid in future, and the otic placid, which will be the ear in future. So all these things are taking part in the development of the face along with the first 2 arches. So we will go into the detail of these arches and the derivatives of these arches are. I hope you know now what is the arch and what is the pharyngeal cleft and what is the pharyngeal pouch. It will be clear when the lecture is completing. Again, you can see here in this diagram, if you remember from the development of face, I told you that first pharyngeal arch has 2 components, the dorsal and the ventral. The dorsal is called maxillary process and the ventral is called the mandibular process. So the premaxilla, the maxilla, the zygoma, and the part of the temporal bone is formed from the maxillary prominence. And the mandible is formed by the mandibular prominence. So this is that you will remember that these things. This is the diagram. So first pharyngeal arch has 2 wings, the dorsal and the ventral. The dorsal will be converted into premaxilla, maxilla, zygomatic bone, and part of the temporal bone. And the other, that is the mandibular process, will be converting into mandibular mandibular division or the mandible. So it has got the first pharyngeal arch has got a nerve as well, which is called trigeminal nerve. And this can also called fifth cranial nerve. This trigeminal nerve is responsible to supply the areas or the regions which are covered by the first pharyngeal arch, both sensory and motor. We will discuss it in details. Similarly, if you concentrate on this diagram, you can clearly see that here written 1, and it has gone inside into this, and this is called the first pharyngeal pouch. From the mouth cavity, it has gone inside, it has made a pouch. And from the outside, which is lined by the ectodermal layer, it has come down towards this pouch, and it is cleft. Similarly, you can appreciate the second pouch from the mouth cavity, then the third pouch, and then the fourth and fifth pouch. And we will discuss the derivatives of all these. Now it is a full-fledged, you can see from the front. Till now, we were concentrating on the half, on which we could see the first one side. Now, in this diagram, you can see both sides. I told you that on both sides, the pharyngeal arches and the pharyngeal cleft and pouches will be there. So here again, you can see on both sides, on the top, were written capital 1 or the Roman 1. This is actually the first pharyngeal arch. And this is the mandibular process of that. The maxillary process is above that. That is not shown in this diagram. So the maxillary process and the mandibular process it will take in the formation of the maxilla, the nasal bones, the zygoma, and the part of the squamous bone. And this will form the mandible as well. Okay. Now this is the second arch. Second arch again is a mesenchymal tissue lined from outside by the ectoderm and from the inner side by the endoderm. And there is a cleft and there is a pouch inside, and this is called a second pharyngeal pouch. And from outside, it has changed to a, in this condition, the second pharyngeal arch overgrows and it covers the second and the second pharyngeal arch grows and it covers the third and fourth cleft as well. Here you can see again the first pharyngeal arch. This is the Michel's cartilage. Later on, it ossifies at such, and this ossification is called membranous ossification. The mandible is ossified in membranous form. There are two types of ossification. One is endochondral and the other is membranous. Membranous, the tissues are lying this, and at the same time, without any modeling of the cartilaginous structures, they are converted into bone. And the other is, first the cartilage is formed, and then the cartilage is replaced by the osteoblast, and then it is converted into a bone. So the later one is the endochondral, and this one is the membranous one. You can see the derivative of the first arch is mandible, and distally two bones of the middle ear cavity that is called incus and malleus. Incus and malleus. Related to this are the muscles of mastication as well. The masseter, the temporalis, the lateral and medial pterygoid. They are also derived from the first pharyngeal arch. This is in the green form. This is the derivatives of the second pharyngeal arch. The second pharyngeal arch is also called hyoid arch because it will give rise to the part of the hyoid bone, that is the upper part of the body, and with a lesser horn These are ossified and they are formed by the hyoid bone. If you go back like this, it will be give rise to the stylohyoid ligament as well in a styloid process. And if you go back to the medullary cavity, the third bone, which is called Stapes, will be found by the second pharyngeal arch. Here it is written the 3. The yellow portion here it is written 3. These are the derivatives of the third pharyngeal arch. These are the lower part of the body of the hyoid bone. You can see this black, the lower part of the body of the hyoid bone along with the greater horn of the hyoid bone. So this bone is made of 2 pharyngeal arches, the second and the third. And here is the 4th pharyngeal arch in the red color you can see. So from the 4th to 6th जो arch है, 4th, 5th degenerate हो जाता है. The 4th and 5th, the 4th to 6th arch, it gave rise to the cartilages of the larynx. That is the thyroid cartilage, the cricoid cartilage, the arytenoid cartilage, the corniculate cartilage, along with the tracheal ring as well. So these are the derivative of the pharyngeal arches. Acha, the specific, they have got the specific nerves for each arch. For example, the first pharyngeal arch I told you that the 5th nerve, cranial nerve, which is called trigeminal nerve, it will supply the area of the first pharyngeal arch. It has got both sensory and motor component, and it will supply all the area. The second pharyngeal arch has its own nerve, which is called the facial nerve. The facial nerve. It will supply all the facial muscles because it is derived from the second pharyngeal arch. The third pharyngeal arch has its own nerve that is called glossopharyngeal nerve. So this area will be covered by the glossopharyngeal nerve. Similarly, 4 to 6 area, the larynx, the vagus nerve is divided again into external laryngeal and recurrent laryngeal nerve. So the intrinsic muscle of the larynx is supplied by the recurrent laryngeal nerve. Here for simplification, you can see and you can appreciate the arches. The above is the arch which is called the first arch, and the cranial nerve for that is the 5th one, which is called trigeminal. The derivative of the cleft in pouch, you can see here from outside, this cleft will be converted into external auditory meatus or external auditory canal. And from the inner side, it will come down, it will comes toward this external auditory meatus, and this distal part will become dilated, and it will form the middle ear cavity or the tympanic, tubotympanic recess. Ultimately, it will be responsible for the formation of tympanic membrane and the eustachian tube. These are the derivatives, the auditory tube, the eustachian tube, and the tympanic membrane. They are formed by the first pharyngeal pouch. And the external auditory meatus is formed by the pharyngeal cleft, which is come from outside. This is the second pharyngeal arch. I told you that it is also called the hyoid arch, और उससे जो hyoid bone का upper हिस्सा जो है, the upper part of the body and the lesser cornu of the hyoid bone. It is formed from this, and the specific nerve for this is the facial nerve or the 7th cranial nerve. On the inside, there is a pharyngeal pouch from which the palatine tonsil will develop. Below that is the third pharyngeal arch, and you know that the lower part of the bone of the hyoid bone, that is the lower part of the body and the greater horn, they are found by the third arch, and the special supply of this arch is cranial nerve number 9 are glossopharyngeal nerve. Similarly, sorry. Similarly, then comes the third and fourth pouches. So from the third pouch arises or derived the inferior parathyroid gland along with the thymus. And they have a long way to be migrated to its original place. And the fourth one will give the superior parathyroid gland and the ultimobranchial body. These are the pouches. Development are the derivatives of pouches. You can see here the cervical sinus. This is actually the remnants of the external, the pharyngeal clefts, the second, third, fourth to sixth pharyngeal clefts. And this, the second one overgrows over the third and fourth up to sixth, and they are covered completely and they are disconnected from the surface and they appear in the form of a cervical sinus. Sometimes it is communicating cervical cyst. Sometimes it is communicating to the exterior and it is called cervical sinus. Very rarely it goes to the inner side and it is communicating internally with the oral cavity, and then this is called the fistula as well. We leave this for the time being because this is the development of the thyroid gland and its pathway. We will discuss it later on in particular its relevant places. Here again, you can see all the derivatives of the clefts and pouches. The cleft is very easy. The first cleft will give rise to the external adductor meatus, and all the remaining clefts will be overcome by the second one, and finally there's no remnants for that. Occasionally it may be a cervical cyst or a cervical sinus, but it is usually disappeared. From the pouches you can see, from the first pouch, the auditory tube or the cetacean tube will form along with the primitive tympanic cavity. This will be formed by the first pharyngeal pouch. The second pharyngeal pouch will give rise to the palatine, tonsil, and tonsillar fossa. The third pouch will give rise to the parathyroid gland, that is called inferior parathyroid gland. Along with it has got two portions, the dorsal and the ventral, and the other will form the thymus. So the inferior parathyroid gland and the thymus is the derivatives of the third pharyngeal pouch. Similarly, the superior parathyroid gland and the ultimobranchial body, these are the derivatives of the fourth pharyngeal pouch. Ultimobranchial body then later on form the follicular cells of the thyroid, they're called C cells of the thyroid, and they are incorporating into the thyroid gland, and they are responsible for the calcitonin production. So the summary is, you can see in this table, this is from your book, and after understanding it will be easy for you to memorize it. On the extreme left written arches, then the nerves related to these arches, and then the muscles, actually the arches are mesoderm, so the muscle will be arises from this, the muscle and the bone, the ligaments, the related organs, the muscle, and then the skeleton. So it is just a repetition that the first pharyngeal arch will have two portions, the mandibular and maxillary. Okay? The nerve for that will be specific one, and that is called trigeminal nerve, and it was again has got maxillary and mandibular division. The muscles related to this pharyngeal arch are muscle of mastication. Muscle of mastication, कौन से है? These are the masseters, the temporalis, the medial and lateral pterygoids, the mylohyoid, the anterior pili of digastric, and tensor palatine and tensor tympani. Skeleton I told you that the premaxilla, maxilla, zygoma, part of the temporal bone, it will be formed from the maxillary process. The Meckel's cartilage will ultimately form the mandible. And the remnants of this cartilage will be converting into incus and malleus. And there is some part of it will be converted into ligament that is called sphenomandibular ligament. So these are derived of the first pharyngeal arch. And now is trigeminal, again maxillary and mandibular division. The muscles of mastication, anterior of digastric, tensor, etc. Skeleton, motor, premaxilla, maxilla, zygoma, mandible, and incus, malleus, and of the medullary cavity. Then comes the second arch. Second arch, as per Richard's cartilage also इसको कहते हैं, and इसको hyoid भी इसलिए कहते हैं कि part of the hyoid is made from this arch. The specific nerve for this is the seventh cranial nerve or the facial nerve. The muscle originating from this are the facial muscle of facial expression. That is buccinator, auricularis, frontalis, platysma, orbicularis, oris, ecoli. Posterior of digastric. Anterior was from the first pharyngeal arch, and the posterior is from the second pharyngeal arch. The stylohyoid ligament and the stapedius. The stapes bone will be formed by the second pharyngeal arch, so the muscle stapedius will be also derived from this. The third is glossopharyngeal. The only muscle derived from this is stylopharyngeus muscle, and it will take part in the formation of the hyoid bone, that is the greater horn and lower part of the body of the hyoid. 4 to 6. The specific nerve for this is vagus nerve, which is again divided into superior laryngeal and recurrent laryngeal nerve. So the cricothyroid muscle of the larynx, जो है extrinsic muscle of the larynx, they are supplied by the superior laryngeal branch. Cricothyroid, levator palatine, constrictors of pharynx, and are the intrinsic muscle of the larynx. They are supplied by the recurrent laryngeal nerve. And the cartilage of the larynx, that is arytenoid, thyroid, cricoid, carniculate, cuneiform, all these are from the 4 to 6 pharyngeal arches. So I told you in the beginning that the pharyngeal arch is a major contribution in the development of the head and neck. Simply in a glance, these are the derivatives of the pharyngeal pouches. I told you that pouch derivatives are tympanic cavity, medullary cavity, and the eustachian tube from the first pharyngeal pouch. The palatine tonsil and tonsillar fossa from the second pharyngeal pouch. The inferior parathyroid gland and the thymus gland in combination from the third pharyngeal pouch. And the superior parathyroid gland with ultimobranchial body, which will later on contributing to the formation of thyroid gland. This is also called parafollicular cell or C cells, and they are responsible for the production of the calcitonin. Here you can see some abnormality of the development. Here you can see this is the normal picture, the first pharyngeal pouch and the first pharyngeal cleft, and this will ultimately develop into membrane, tympanic membrane, and the tubulotympanic recess. I told you that the first cleft is this. The second, third, and fourth, these clefts are covered by the overgrowth of the second one. Sometime it does not cover all the clefts, and communication with the exterior is found. So this communication with the exterior is called external branchial fistula. Sometimes it may communicate with the interior as well, but now this time it is at the posterior. This is again the later view of the human. You can see the band here, the gray band. This is sternocleidomastoid muscle. Then you can see these parts And anterior to the sternocleidomastoid, these are the regions of lateral cervical cyst and fistula. We talked about that the first pharyngeal cleft will be converted to external edematous. So the second, third, and fourth, they are actually covered by the normal skin and no appearance from outside. Sometimes a collection of fluid may appear and it will be visible, but they will be visible in this position in a line anterior to the sternocleidomastoid, below the mandible, and in a line with the sternocleidomastoid muscle. These are the places of the lateral cervical cyst. And sometimes if they are, some people mistakenly think that it is an abscess and they drain it. So due to the incision drainage of this cyst, it will be converting into fistula, and a persistent secretion will come from the inside. Here again, this will lead again to the thyroid region. We will discuss it in detail when we are doing thyroid. So this was all about the pharyngeal apparatus, which comprises of pharyngeal arches, which are lined by ectodermal from the outside, ectodermal layer from the outside, and endodermal from the inside. I hope you can now understand what is pharyngeal arches are and how it contributes to the development of the face. Thank you very much. Jazakallah.